The coins hit the dirt. Before they hit Kofi's palm, Amara stood at the village square altar in borrowed white cloth. Her father shoved crumpled bills toward the man in the patched hunting shirt. The crowd, neighbors, cousins, laughed behind cupped hands. "Take my cursed daughter," Chief Osei announced, loud enough for the baobab trees to hear. "No dowry needed for a beggar's match." Kofi said nothing. He bent, collected the money from the dust, and extended his calloused hand to Amara. No apology. No shame. Just quiet eyes that saw her. Have you ever been judged by what people thought you were worth, not who you truly are? This is one of those African stories rooted in African folklore, the kind of life stories, touching stories, and real-life stories villages whisper for generations, because the hunter wasn't hunting game. He was hunting the one thing wealth can't buy. 3 weeks earlier, Amara had been promised to a different man. The village of Akoma sat in Ghana's cocoa belt. Red dirt roads wound between cassava farms. The missionary school's tin roof caught rain like drumbeats. Here a daughter's worth was measured in bride price. 50 goats meant respect. Gold bangles meant legacy. Empty hands meant shame that clung to a family like smoke. Amara was 23, the eldest of Chief Osei's 3 daughters. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving behind one piece of advice whispered on a fever-hot night. True worth lives in the heart, child, not the purse. Chief Osei had not listened. He was a widower who measured love in public opinion. When drought killed his cocoa trees 2 seasons ago, he'd borrowed money from every elder in the village. The debt sat on his shoulders like a vulture. His solution was simple: marry Amara to the wealthiest bidder. Kwame was that bidder. The palm oil merchant's son arrived in a Land Cruiser with tinted windows. His teeth were too white. His laughter was too loud. The bride price was agreed upon in Chief Osei's courtyard: 50 goats, 10 gold bangles, and a cash payment that would erase every debt the chief owed. Amara was not consulted. She learned about her engagement the way she learned everything important, by overhearing. She had been carrying water from the well when 2 aunties gossiped loud enough for the entire compound to hear. 50 goats! The chief finally did something right. That girl is lucky. Grammy could have any woman. Lucky. Amara set down the water bucket and stared at her reflection in the basin. She had inherited her mother's wide-set eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She had taught herself to read at the missionary school. She had won a scholarship to Teachers College in Accra. She had planned to leave Akoma and return only for holidays. Now, she was 50 goats. The wedding was scheduled for the first Saturday in October. Amara spent the week before sewing her white dress by hand. Each stitch was a tiny prayer that maybe Kwame would be kind. Maybe he would let her teach. Maybe she could carve out a corner of her life that still belonged to her. Then, 5 days before the wedding, Kwame sent a messenger. The man arrived on a motorbike, dust trailing behind him like a broken promise. He handed Chief Osei a sealed envelope and left without waiting for a reply. Amara was sweeping the courtyard when her father read the letter. She heard the paper crumple before she heard his roar. Ungrateful dog. Chief Osei stormed out of the house, the letter clutched in his fist. Amara followed at a distance, her broom forgotten. The entire village seemed to materialize. Neighbors leaning from doorways, children pausing their soccer game, elders stopping mid-conversation. Her father read the letter aloud in the village square. His voice shook with rage. To Chief Osei, after careful consideration, I have decided not to proceed with the marriage to your daughter Amara. She is too educated and will not respect a husband's authority. I wish you well in finding a more suitable match. Signed, Kwame Mensah. The silence that followed was worse than any insult. Amara stood frozen 20 feet away. The words sank into the red dirt and took root. Too educated, not suitable. The scholarship letter from Accra Teachers College was still tucked under her mattress. Acceptance dated for January. Now it might as well have been kindling. Chief Osei crumpled the letter and threw it to the ground. His eyes found Amara across the square. She saw something she'd never seen before in her father's face. Panic disguised as fury. No daughter of mine will remain unmarried, he announced to the assembled crowd. The village will not call us cursed. That night he came to her room with a new plan. You will marry within the week, he said, standing in the doorway like a man delivering a court sentence. I have found someone who will take you without bride price. Who? It doesn't matter. You will accept. Amara felt her mother's voice echo in the silence. True worth lives in the heart. But her father had never learned to listen to ghosts. The next morning, Chief Osei visited Kofi's hut at the edge of the forest. Kofi was a hunter. Everyone in Akoma knew him by reputation, if not by name. He lived alone in a thatched roof dwelling. He brought bushmeat to the market every week. He always paid the elders first before keeping his share. He wore the same threadbare tunic and had never attended village council meetings. But twice a month a messenger arrived from the city with sealed letters. And Kofi always burned them after reading. He was perfect for Chief Osei's purposes, poor enough to accept no dowry, quiet enough not to spread gossip, mysterious enough that no one would ask questions. "Marry my daughter," the chief said without preamble. "No bride price required. Just take her within 3 days so the village forgets this shame." Kofi was mending a fishing net when the chief arrived. He looked up slowly. His hands still moved through the knots. He studied the older man's face. "Why would I do that?" "Because you'll never get another chance at a wife like her." "And why would she agree?" Chief Osei's jaw tightened. "Because I'm her father and she has no choice." Kofi set down the net. "I'll marry her," he said quietly, "but only if she consents." "I won't force a woman into anything." The chief waved a hand dismissively. "She'll consent. She has no other options." 2 days later, Amara stood under the baobab tree in a borrowed white cloth. No music, no feast. No guests beyond 20 witnesses who came out of curiosity rather than celebration. Kofi arrived in his usual patched shirt. He carried something small wrapped in banana leaf. When the elder asked if he had a bride gift, Kofi unwrapped it carefully. A wooden bird no bigger than Amara's palm, carved from mahogany. Its wings were spread mid-flight. Each feather was detailed with a precision that must have taken hours, or money for proper tools. "For you," Kofi said, meeting her eyes for the first time. "So you remember you're not trapped." Amara took the bird. Her hands trembled. It was the first gift anyone had given her without conditions attached. The ceremony lasted 7 minutes. When the elder pronounced them married, no one clapped. As they walked away from the square, Kofi draped something over Amara's shoulders. A scarf of indigo cloth, soft as water, the kind wealthy families displayed during festivals. "You're cold," he said simply. She wasn't cold. It was 30 degrees and humid. But she understood he was giving her something else, a shield against the stairs, a small kindness when the world had offered her none. That night, in Kofi's one-room hut, with its clean swept floor and locked wooden chest in the corner, Amara set the carved bird on the windowsill. She noticed the chest had a brass lock, the expensive kind merchants used. Outside she could hear the village laughing. Inside, Kofi was already asleep on a mat by the door. He had left her the bed without asking for anything in return. She lay awake, staring at the bird's outstretched wings, and wondered what kind of man carves freedom as a wedding gift and owns a brass merchant's lock. Amara woke to the smell of fresh bread. Kofi was gone. A note lay on the table in careful handwriting. "Mark it today." Took 3 rabbits. Back before noon. Beside it sat a loaf wrapped in cloth, still warm, and a cup of hibiscus tea. She ate slowly, watching the wooden bird on the windowsill catch morning light. This was her life now. A one-room hut with walls that didn't quite meet the roof. A husband who slept by the door and asked for nothing. A village that had already forgotten her name and remembered only her shame. The scholarship letter to Accra Teachers' College was still under her mattress back at her father's house. She had not gone back to retrieve it. Some doors once closed were easier to leave shut. By the second week, Amara established a routine. She woke early, fetched water from the well, cooked yam porridge or groundnut soup depending on what Kofi brought home. She swept the floor twice daily because it gave her hands something to do. She avoided the village square. Kofi was gone most days, returning at dusk with game or fish. He split his earnings with the elders first. She watched him hand old Nanaya half his smoked tilapia without being asked. He thanked Amara for every meal. He never raised his voice. He never touched her without permission. At night he slept on his mat by the door, a machete within arm's reach. It was as if he guarded her from something she couldn't see. It was the kindest cage she'd ever known. On the 15th day of marriage, Amara went to market. She carried woven baskets she'd made from palm fronds, 12 of them, each tight-weaved and sturdy. She set up near the fruit sellers, the same spot her mother had used years ago. The other wives saw her coming. They turned their backs. Isi, the blacksmith's wife, actually moved her table 3 feet away. Seabina, who had been Amara's classmate at missionary school, suddenly found her mangoes fascinating. When Amara tried to greet Adjoa, the seamstress, the woman looked right through her. "Don't let the beggar's wife touch our goods," someone muttered loud enough for 3 stalls to hear. Amara stood there for 2 hours. No one approached her table. She sold nothing. At noon she packed the baskets and walked home, her eyes burning but dry. She had learned years ago that tears were a currency no one valued. That evening Kofi came home early. He said nothing about the unsold baskets stacked in the corner. He made dinner himself, plantain and beans, and served her first. After they ate, he picked up all 12 baskets. "Where are you going?" Amara asked. "Errand." He returned an hour later, empty-handed. The next morning, Amara saw children at the orphanage carrying her baskets filled with mangoes and bread. Kofi had bought every single one and donated them as gifts. She didn't thank him. She didn't know how to hold kindness that expected nothing back. But she started noticing other things. The locked chest in the corner had scratch marks around the keyhole, as if it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. Once she glimpsed inside when Kofi opened it quickly. Stacks of papers, a leather-bound ledger, and something that looked like a seal or stamp. He always burned letters after reading them. The ashes went into the river, never the trash, and twice a month he disappeared for 3 full days. No hunting, no fish. He returned with empty hands but full pockets. She heard coins shift when he walked. He donated the money within hours to the village well fund or the school repairs. Where was a poor hunter getting city money? On the 4th week, Amma came to visit. The midwife was 70 years old. Her back bent like a question mark, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She walked with a cane carved from ironwood and wore indigo beads that marked her as an elder healer. Everyone in Akoma respected Amma, even Chief Osei. She arrived without invitation, carrying a clay pot of shea butter. "For your hands," she said, pressing it into Amara's palms. "Teaching children dries the skin." Amara blinked. "I don't teach anymore, don't you?" Amma nodded toward the backyard. Amara followed her gaze. 3 children sat under the mango tree, 2 boys and a girl no older than 8. They were playing with sticks in the dirt, drawing letters. "They come every afternoon," Amma said. "You teach them through the window." "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Amara's throat tightened. She had been whispering lessons through the back window for 2 weeks, thinking no one saw. The children were too poor for school fees. She taught them alphabet, numbers, basic reading. "Does the village know?" "The village sees what it wants to see," Amma said. "But I see what matters. You carry your mother's grace, child." They sat together on the step. Amma moved slowly, lowering herself with a wince. Amara noticed the tremor in the old woman's hands. "Are you well, Amma?" "Well enough." "Old bones, old complaints." She waved a hand. "Tell me about your hunter. What about him? Does he treat you kindly?" Amara hesitated. "Yes." "Does he respect your boundaries?" "Yes." "Does he ask where you go, who you speak to, what you think?" "No, he leaves me alone," Amma smiled. "That's not leaving you alone, child. That's giving you space. There's a difference." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Amma leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your husband travels to the city once a month. Did you know? He disappears sometimes." I assumed hunting. No hunter returns from 3 days in the bush with clean fingernails and city dust on his boots. Amara's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying patience. Truth has long roots. Watch what a man does when no one's watching." Before Amara could respond, Amma stood, groaning with effort. "I'll return next week. Teach those children well. A village that refuses to educate its daughters is a village dying from the inside." She left, her cane tapping against the dirt road. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the locked chest, city dust on his boots. She hadn't noticed, but now she replayed every detail. Kofi washing his feet carefully when he returned from trips. The faint smell of diesel and asphalt. The way he checked his pockets before entering, as if ensuring he carried no evidence. Evidence of what? At dawn, she made a decision. She would teach the children openly. 3 became 5. 5 became 8. She set up a proper classroom under the mango tree, used charcoal on flat stones as chalkboards. She taught reading, arithmetic, basic science. She charged no fees. The village women still shunned her at market. But the children came, and Kofi never stopped her. On the 6th week of marriage, Chief Osi arrived drunk. It was mid-afternoon. Hamara was teaching fractions to a group of 10 children when her father stumbled into the yard, reeking of palm wine. "Where is he?" Osi demanded. "Hunting. Liar, I saw him at the bank in town yesterday." "The bank." Amara stood slowly. The children scattered. Her father swayed, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "You're hiding something." "That man is hiding something. He dresses like a beggar but walks into banks like he owns them." "You're drunk. Go home. I'm your father. You owe me respect. You owe me compensation for the shame you brought on." "I brought nothing," Amara said quietly. "You sold me twice. Once for 50 goats. Once for free. I owe you silence, and you've used that up." Osei's hand shot out. For a moment she thought he would strike her, but Kofi's voice cut through the yard like a blade. "Touch her and you'll answer to more than me." He stood at the edge of the property, a machete in one hand, 3 rabbits slung over his shoulder. His face was calm, but something in his posture made Chief Osei take a step back. "You owe me," Osei slurred. "For you took my daughter without paying proper—" "I owe you nothing," Kofi said. Amara chose freely. "If you come here again making threats, I'll bring it to the village council. Do you want them examining how you forced this marriage? How you violated the consent clause in traditional law?" Amara's breath caught. Consent clause. That was real legal language. How did a hunter know traditional law? Chief Osei opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned and staggered away, muttering curses. When he was gone, Kofi set down the rabbits and looked at Amara. "Are you hurt?" "No," her voice shook. "You knew the law." "I read. Hunters don't quote legal clauses." Kofi's expression didn't change. "Smart ones do." He walked inside, leaving her standing in the yard, her mind racing. That night after dinner, Amara made a choice. Kofi. He looked up from sharpening his knife. "Why did you marry me?" He considered the question for a long moment. Then he set down the blade. "Because when I first saw you teaching those children by the river, you charged them nothing, because you fetched water for Nana Ya when she was sick. Because when Kwame rejected you in front of everyone, you didn't beg. You stood there with your head high." He paused. "I wanted to marry someone who knew her worth, even when no one else did." Amara's throat tightened. "You don't know me. I know what matters." He stood, stretched, and lay down on his mat by the door. "Sleep well?" "Amara, tomorrow the children will need you rested." She lay awake for hours, staring at the wooden bird on the windowsill. A man who knew law, who visited banks, who had noticed her teaching by the river. Who was she married to? The drought came in the 8th week of their marriage. It started with small signs. The well water dropped 3 feet. Cassava leaves turned yellow at the edges. The morning air tasted like dust, and the sky held no promise of rain. By the 9th week, Chief Osi called an emergency village meeting. Amara stood at the back of the square with the other women, watching her father climb onto the speaker's platform. He looked older than she remembered. His shoulders stooped, his face gaunt. The debts he'd tried to erase with her marriage had only multiplied. "The harvest has failed," Osei announced. "Without rain, we have maybe 6 weeks of stored grain." After that, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what came after. Starvation, migration, the slow death of a village. "We need emergency supplies," an elder said. "Rice, dried fish, cooking oil." "With what money?" Someone shouted back. Silence settled over the square like a shroud. That night, Amara counted their own supplies. 2 bags of rice, a few yams, some dried tilapia. Enough for maybe 3 weeks if they rationed carefully. Kofi came home late, his face unreadable. "We'll be fine," he said simply. "The village won't be." He looked at her for a long moment. "No, it won't." 3 days later, a miracle arrived. 200 bags of rice appeared in Chief Osei's storehouse overnight. No note, no name. Just rice stacked floor to ceiling, enough to feed the village for 2 months. The square erupted in speculation. It must be a donor from Accra. Maybe the government finally remembered we exist. I heard it was the church in Kumasi. Chief Osei, of course, took credit. He stood on his platform and declared he'd called in favors from old friends and negotiated a community grant. Amara watched from her classroom under the mango tree. She saw the lie in her father's posture. The way he stood too straight, spoke too loud, like a man trying to convince himself. That evening, She confronted Kofi. "Did you buy the rice?" He was cleaning fish at the outdoor basin. His knife moved with surgical precision, each cut exact. "Why would you think that?" "Because you disappear for days. You come back with empty hands but clean fingernails. You donate money you shouldn't have." She stepped closer. "And because 200 bags of rice costs at least 15,000 cedis. Where would a hunter get that?" Kofi set down the knife. He dried his hands slowly on a cloth. Then he looked at her with those quiet, measuring eyes. "If I told you I'd been saving for 10 years, would you believe me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because saving means you planned this. All of it, the marriage, the donations, the secrecy." Her voice cracked. "Who are you?" Kofi stood. He walked to the hut and returned with the locked chest. He set it on the ground between them and produced a small brass key from a chain around his neck. "I'll show you," he said. "But first you need to understand why I hid it." He opened the chest. Inside, stacks of papers, business documents, bank statements, and a leather-bound ledger. Amara knelt, her hands shaking as she picked up the first sheet. Kobena Industries Limited Annual Board Meeting Minutes. March 2024. Chairman, Kofi Mensah. Her breath stopped. "Chairman?" Kofi nodded. "I started with nothing. Hunted bushmeat. Saved every cedi. Invested in cocoa export when the Chinese market opened. 15 years ago, I registered the company. 10 years ago, we went international. Last year, we cleared 40 million cedis in profit." Amara's mind reeled. 40 million. The number didn't even sound real. "Why?" she whispered. "Why live like this? Why the rags, the hut, the—" "Because I wanted to know who would see me." Kofi sat on the ground beside her, his voice low and steady. "When you have money in a village like Akoma, everyone sees the money. They smile at your wealth, not your character. Women want the mansion. Men want the connections. Children want the gifts." He picked up a document, then set it down. "I wanted a wife who would love me for who I am, not what I have. So you tested us." "The whole village?" "Yes." Amara felt anger rise in her chest like floodwater. "You let people mock you. Mock me. You let my father sell me like livestock while you watched." I intervened the moment I could do it without exposing everything. His voice was calm but firm. "Your father was going to marry you to Kwame. I couldn't stop that directly. I had no social standing, but I could wait. And when Kwame rejected you, I could offer what your father needed, a quick solution that wouldn't cost him money. You used my humiliation. I gave you a choice." Kofi's gaze didn't waver. "I asked if you consented. You could have said no. And starved? Been shamed forever? And gone to Accra?" He pulled out another paper, the acceptance letter from Teachers College, the one she'd left under her mattress. "I retrieved this from your father's house. You can still go. I'll pay the fees. You can leave tomorrow if you want." Amara stared at the letter. Her hands trembled as she took it. "Why would you let me leave?" "Because a cage is still a cage, even if the bars are kind." The words hit her like a fist. She thought of the wooden bird, wings spread in flight. "So you remember you're not trapped." She had been so focused on his deception that she'd missed the truth. He'd never once forced her to stay. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "You don't have to. But you deserve to know what you married into." He gestured at the documents. "Kobena Industries employs 500 people. 80 of them are from Akoma, anonymously hired through recruiters, so no one traces it back to me. We've funded the well repairs, the orphanage, the school supplies. Everything people think the government did, we did. Why hide it? Because the moment people know, everything changes. I become Chief Kofi, the benefactor. Every decision I make is political. Every kindness is transactional." He closed the chest partially. "I wanted one part of my life to be real. I wanted you to be real." Amara's anger warred with something else, a reluctant understanding. She had spent her whole life being valued for the wrong things. Her father saw bride price, Kwame saw obedience, the village saw shame. Kofi had seen her teach children for free. "The rice," she said. "You bought it, through a logistics company we own, delivered anonymously, and my baskets at the orphanage. I couldn't let your work go to waste. The money you donate every month, dividends from investments. I give 70% to the village, keep 30% for operating costs." Amara sat back on her heels. Her entire reality was rewriting itself. The poor hunter was a corporate chairman. The threadbare hut was a disguise. The quiet man who slept by the door commanded boardrooms in Accra. Does anyone know? Ama suspects. She's too smart not to. But she keeps her own counsel. And you're telling me now because secrets are only useful until they become walls. Kofi met her eyes. I don't want walls between us, Amara. I want partnership. But that requires honesty. She looked at the documents spread between them. Birth certificates for the company, tax filings, contracts with international buyers, bank statements showing millions, a world she'd never imagined, and suddenly it made sense. The carved bird with perfect detail, the indigo cloth worn by royalty, the way he quoted legal clauses, the clean fingernails after hunting trips, the city dust Amma had noticed. He hadn't been hiding poverty, he'd been hiding wealth. What happens now? She asked quietly. That's up to you. You can leave for Accra tomorrow. You can stay and we build something together. Or you can take time to think. He gestured at the chest. But now you know the truth. I won't hide anymore. Not from you. Amara opened her mouth to respond, and then she heard shouting from the village square. They both froze. The voices were angry, urgent. Kofi's expression shifted. Something dark and resigned crossed his face. It started, he said quietly. What started? He stood, offering her his hand. The reckoning. They ran toward the square. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. The crowd had gathered under the torches, faces lit with the strange excitement that comes before violence or justice, sometimes both. Chief Osei stood on the platform. Beside him was Kwame. Amara's blood turned to ice. Kwame held a ledger, his face twisted with triumph. When he saw Kofi and Amara approach, his smile widened. There he is, Kwame shouted, pointing. The thief! The crowd parted. Amara felt every eye land on them. Chief Osei's voice rang out across the square. Kofi Mensah, you stand accused of theft. 200 bags of rice were stolen from the Mensah family warehouse 3 nights ago. Kwame has evidence that you withdrew 15,000 cedis from the district bank, the exact value of the stolen goods on the same day the rice appeared in my storehouse. Amara's hand tightened on Kofi's arm. This is a trap, I know, Kofi murmured. His voice was steady, almost calm. Kwame forged the records. He's the one who stole the rice to cover his gambling debts. Now he needs a scapegoat. Then defend yourself. I will. He looked down at her and something in his eyes made her breath catch. But when I do, everything changes. The disguise ends. The test ends. Are you ready for that? She didn't know. But the crowd was closing in and Kwame was opening the ledger, and her father was calling for rope to bind Kofi's hands. Step forward, Hunter, Chief Osei commanded. Answer the charges or be judged guilty by silence. Kofi squeezed Amara's hand once. Then he released it and walked into the center of the square. The torchlight caught his face, still calm, still unreadable. He looked like a man about to play his final card in a game he'd been planning for years. Kwame thrust the ledger toward the village elder. The bank record is here. 15,000 cedis withdrawn in cash by Kofi Mensah on the 14th of September. The same day the rice appeared. The elder studied the page, frowning. Chief Osei stepped forward. Do you deny making this withdrawal? Kofi looked at the crowd. His gaze swept across the faces. The wives who'd shunned Amara, the men who'd mocked him, to the elders who'd ignored him for years. Then he looked at Amara, and she saw the decision in his eyes. No, Kofi said clearly. I don't deny it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I withdrew 15,000 cedis from my account, he continued. But I didn't steal anything. Liar. Kwame spat. Where would a beggar get? I'm not a beggar. The square went silent. Kofi reached into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a business card and handed it to Nana Kofi, the eldest member of the council. The old man squinted at it in the torchlight. His eyes widened. What does it say? Someone called out. Nana Kofi's voice shook as he read aloud, Kobina Industries Limited. Kofi Mensah, chairman and CEO. The silence that followed was so absolute that Amara could hear her own heartbeat. Kofi stood in the center of the square, surrounded by torches and stairs, and spoke 4 words that would change everything. I bought the rice. The words hung in the air like smoke. I bought the rice. For 3 heartbeats. No one moved. Then Chief Osei laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Impossible. You're a hunter. You live in a shack. Rags, yes. Kofi's voice carried across the square without rising. By choice, not necessity. He pulled out his phone. Not the battered flip phone everyone had seen him use at market, but a sleek smartphone that caught torchlight like water. He tapped the screen twice and held it toward Nana Kofi. The elder took it with shaking hands. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened. No sound came out. What does it say? Someone shouted. Nana Kofi's voice cracked. 8,400,000 cedis. Silence. Then the square exploded. That's fake. He doctored it! 8 million? Amara watched faces transform around her. Isi's hand flew to her mouth. Abina staggered backward. Old Nanaya sank to her knees in the dirt, her eyes fixed on Kofi like he'd grown wings. Kofi waited. He stood perfectly still in the center of the square, the torchlight making his shadow long and strange, until the noise died down to whispers. That's one of 4 accounts, he said quietly. Kobina Industries cleared 40 million cedis in profit last year. We export cocoa to 12 countries. We employ 500 workers across Ghana. He paused. Let that number settle like dust. 80 of them are from Akoma. This time the silence was different, heavier, the kind that comes when people realize they've been walking on sacred ground while thinking it was dirt. Kwame found his voice first. You're lying, am I? Kofi turned to face him fully. The movement was small, but something in it made Kwame take a step back. Let's talk about lies, Kofi said. You claim rice was stolen from your family's warehouse, but your father's warehouse hasn't held rice in 6 months. He switched to palm nuts after the weevil infestation last March. Public record. Kwame's face went white. The rice I bought came from Kumasi grain exporters. I have the receipt. Kofi tapped his phone again. I just sent it to Nana Kofi. Digital transfer. 15,000 cedis. GPS-tracked delivery to Akoma on September 14th. The elder checked his phone. His face went grim. It's here. The receipt is legitimate. That doesn't prove, Kwame started. Your ledger says I withdrew cash, Kofi interrupted. But my company hasn't used cash transactions in 3 years. Everything is mobile banking. Every seed I accounted for time-stamped, traceable. He tilted his head slightly. So either I invented time travel to withdraw cash that doesn't exist, or you forged that ledger. Kwame opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You want to know why you forged it? Kofi's voice was still quiet, still calm. Because 2 months ago you stole your own family's seed grain. 300 bags. Sold it to a dealer in Kumasi for 35,000 cedis. You needed the money to pay off loan sharks. That's 40,000 cedis owed to a man named Kofi Boateng. Street name, the moneylender. He operates out of Kumasi Central Market. He threatened to break your legs if you didn't pay by the end of September. Kwame's knees buckled slightly. Amara saw her father's face change. Saw the moment understanding hit him like a fist. The seed grain, Chief Osei whispered. You told me it was ruined by rain. You said we couldn't replant because of moisture. Kwame said nothing. You stole from your own family? Osei's voice rose. You would have let an innocent man hang to cover your theft. I needed the money. The loan sharks were going to kill me. The confession hung in the air. The crowd surged forward. 2 farmers grabbed Kwame's arms before he could run. He struggled, but they held him fast. Holding cell, Nana Kofi commanded. Now they dragged Kwame away. His protests faded into the darkness beyond the torches. The square fell silent again. Chief Osei stood alone on the platform. He looked at Kofi like a man seeing a ghost or a god. His voice came out hoarse, broken. You've had millions. This whole time, you let us call you a beggar. You married my daughter for nothing, when you could have paid 100 times what Kwame offered. I married your daughter, Kofi said slowly, because she's worth more than any bride price could measure. His eyes found Amara in the crowd, because she taught children for free, because she fetched water for elders who couldn't walk, because when Kwame rejected her in front of everyone, she didn't beg. She stood there with her spine straight and her head high. He paused. She was the only person in this village who saw people instead of profit. Every eye turned to Amara. She felt her face burn, felt tears sting her eyes. But she didn't look away. Kofi walked toward her. The crowd parted like water. When he reached her, he held out his hand. She took it. Her fingers trembled in his palm. He led her to the center of the square, into the circle of torchlight where everyone could see. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden bird, the one he'd given her at their wedding 2 months ago. "I carved this," Kofi said, "not to her, to everyone, the night I decided to ask for Amara's hand. I wanted her to know she wasn't trapped, that I would never cage her no matter what I owned." He turned the bird over in his hands. His thumb found a hidden groove. "But I carved something else too," he pressed. The bird's base opened with a soft click. The square held its breath inside a folded paper yellowed at the edges. Kofi drew it out carefully and handed it to Amara. Her hand shook so hard she almost dropped it. "Read it," he said softly. She unfolded the document. The words blurred. She blinked, tried again. "Land deed, 10 acres, Accra District transfer of ownership to Amara Mensa Scholarship Fund, Accra Teachers College. 4 years. Full tuition, paid in advance." Her breath stopped. "It's yours," Kofi said. His voice was gentle now, meant only for her even though everyone was listening. "It was always yours. Whether you stay with me or leave for Accra tomorrow, you have land in your name. You have education paid for. You have choices." The tears came then, hot and sudden and unstoppable. "I don't want a wife who stays because she has nowhere else to go," Kofi continued. "I want a partner who chooses me every day, who knows she's free and stays anyway." Amara looked up at him through blurred vision, at this man who'd worn rags and carved freedom into wood, who'd let a village mock him so he could see who they really were. "You gave me wings," she whispered. "You always had them. I just reminded you." Around them the crowd was silent, but faces were changing. Isi was crying. Abina had her hands pressed to her heart. Old Nana Ya was nodding slowly, her eyes bright. Amara turned to face the square, to face the women who'd shunned her, the men who'd mocked her, the father who'd sold her twice. "I choose to stay," she said. Her voice shook, but it carried. "Not because I have to, because I want to." She looked at Kofi. "Because you saw me when everyone else looked through me." Something shifted in his expression, relief and joy, and something deeper she didn't have a name for yet. He smiled. Then he turned, back to Chief Osi. The gentleness left his face. "You sold your daughter twice," Kofi said. "Once to a man who rejected her for being educated. Once to a man you thought was too poor to refuse. You never asked what she wanted. You never saw who she was." Chief Osei's shoulders sagged. "I gave this village everything," Kofi continued. "Wells, schools, orphanage funding, jobs, food during drought. And you thanked me by mocking my wife for marrying a poor man." He looked at the wives who'd turned their backs on Amara at market. "Essie, Abena, Ajoa." He named them. "Your husbands work for my company. Your children learn in schools I built. Your water runs clean because of wells I funded." His voice was still quiet, still deadly calm. "And you treated my wife like she carried disease." Essie was openly sobbing now. Abena couldn't meet his eyes. Hajoa had wrapped her arms around herself like a shield. "I didn't do this for gratitude," Kofi said. "I did it because Akoma is home. But I wanted to see what kind of people lived here. I wanted to know if money was all you valued." He paused. "Most of you failed." The words landed like stones in water. Nana Kofi stepped forward, his cane tapping. "What do you want from us?" "Change." Kofi's answer was immediate. "Abolish the bride price. Require written consent for all marriages. Let daughters inherit land the same as sons. Value women for their minds, not their obedience. That's our tradition. Tradition that starves talent is just cruelty with a prettier name." Kofi looked at the elders. "Choose. Accept these terms and Kobina Industries continues investing here. Refuse, and I move operations to Kumasi. Your jobs disappear. Your funding dries up. And you can keep your traditions while your children leave for cities that value them." The elders conferred in urgent whispers. Finally, Nana Kofi nodded. "We accept. New marriage laws within the month." Kofi turned to Chief Osei one last time. "You're relieved of your position. The council will elect new leadership by week's end." Osei's face crumpled. "You can't." "I can't," Kofi agreed. "But they can." "Nana Kofi?" The old man looked at Osei with something like pity. "Step down, Chief, you've earned it." The other elders murmured agreement. Chief Osei stood alone. Stripped, broken, he looked at Amara. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She held his gaze. "I know. Some apologies came too late. But she could carry forgiveness anyway. Not for him, but for herself." Kofi offered his arm. Amara took it. Together they walked through the parted crowd. past the whispering wives and stunned elders, past the platform where her father stood ruined, past the baobab tree where they'd married in shame. Behind them, the village erupted in noise, but Amara heard none of it. She looked at the man beside her, hunter and king, beggar and billionaire, husband who'd given her wings, and asked, "What happens now?" Kofi smiled. "Now we build something real." The apology came 6 weeks later. Amara was teaching mathematics under the mango tree, 23 students now, boys and girls ages 6 to 14, when she saw her father walking up the path. He moved differently, slower. His shoulders curved inward like a man carrying invisible weight. The children noticed him and fell silent. Everyone in Akoma knew what had happened at the square. How Chief Osi had lost his title. How his greed had been exposed in torchlight for all to see. "Keep working," Amara told her students gently. "Practice the fractions we reviewed." She stood and walked to meet her father at the edge of the yard. They hadn't spoken since the night of the reckoning. Osei stopped 3 feet away. He held his hands clasped in front of him like a penitent. "I came to apologize," he said. His voice was rough, unused. "Properly this time," Amara waited. "I sold you twice." He looked at the ground. "I told myself it was for the family, for honor, for survival. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of being poor, afraid of being laughed at. So I made you pay the price for my fear." He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "You deserved a father who saw you, who valued your mind and your heart. Instead, you got me." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Amara. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to hear it." The words sat between them like stones. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Not yet. I forgive you," she said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. I know. You can visit. Twice a year. Supervised at first. If you prove you've changed, we can talk about more." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. But if you ever try to control me again, if you ever treat another woman the way you treated me, that door closes. Forever." He nodded quickly. "I understand." Amara stepped back. "Goodbye, father." He left without another word. She watched him walk down the path, this man who'd given her life but nearly stolen her future. She felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite peace, but the beginning of it. Behind her, a child called out, "Teacher Amara, I finished the fractions." She turned back to her students and smiled. "Show me." By the 10th week, the village council had drafted new laws. Kofi and Amara attended the public reading in the square. Nana Kofi stood on the platform, the same platform where Chief Osei had once held court, and read from a handwritten document. Effective immediately. Marriage in Akoma requires written consent from both parties. Bride price is abolished. Daughters inherit land equally with sons. Women may own businesses and property in their own names. He looked up. Any man or woman who violates these laws will answer to the council and face penalties including exile. The crowd murmured. Some faces showed relief. Others showed resistance. Old men who'd built their power on tradition. Older women who'd survived by enforcing it. But the young people, the daughters and sons who'd watched Amara stand in the square and choose freedom, they cheered. Change wouldn't come overnight. But it had started. 3 months after the wedding, Amma fell ill. The midwife had been declining for weeks, hands trembling more, her cough deepening. One morning she didn't come to her usual seat under the baobab tree, where she counseled young mothers. Amara found her in bed. "Favor bright and weak. Just old bones giving up," Amma whispered. But her smile was tired. The village doctor came. Malaria, complicated by age and a failing heart. The medicine would cost 500 cedis, and might buy weeks, not months. Kofi paid it within the hour. For 2 weeks, Amara visited every evening. She brought soup that Amma barely touched. She read aloud from the books of proverbs Amma loved. She held the old woman's hand and listened to stories about Amara's mother, stories she'd never heard before. "Your mother knew her worth," Amma said one evening, her voice thin as thread, "even when your father forgot to see it. She would have been so proud of you, child. I wish she could have met Kofi. Oh, she knows him." Amma's eyes drifted to the window where the wooden bird sat on the sill. "The ancestors see everything. They watch us choose, between bitterness and grace, between fear and faith. Your mother is watching you choose grace every day." Amara's throat tightened. I miss her. Then live in a way that honors her memory. Teach those girls. Show this village that a woman's worth isn't measured in goats or gold, but in the lives she touches. 3 days later, Ama died in her sleep. The village buried her under the baobab tree wrapped in indigo cloth. Over 200 people came, more than had attended any funeral in Akoma's history. The woman who'd delivered half the village, who'd healed their wounds and kept their secrets, was finally seeing how deeply she'd been loved. At the funeral, Amara stood before the assembled crowd and spoke through tears. Ama taught me that character matters more than status, that patience is stronger than pride, that a village choosing to stay the same is a village choosing to die slowly. She looked at the faces around her, young and old, rich and poor. She saw what we could become if we had the courage to change. Let's not disappoint her. Afterward, the council offered Kofi the chieftaincy. He declined. I'm a businessman, he said simply. You need a leader who lives here fully, who understands the land and the people, someone you trust. He nominated Nana Kofi. The elders voted unanimously. The old man accepted with tears streaming down his weathered face. I will serve, he said, as Ama would have wanted. With wisdom, not power. With listening, not commands. 6 months after the wedding, Amara stood in their hut, holding the acceptance letter from Accra Teachers College. The envelope had been opened and resealed so many times the edges were soft. Inside, the offer still stood. Full scholarship, 4 years, start date in January. I could go, she said to Kofi, who was reviewing ledgers at the table. The scholarship is still valid. I could study, become certified, come back as a real teacher. Kofi set down his pen and looked at her. You could, or I could stay. Build the school here, train teachers from the village, change Akoma from the inside. You could do that too. What do you want me to do? He stood and crossed to her, took her hands in his. I want you to choose what makes you whole, he said quietly. If that's Accra, I'll visit every weekend. If that's here, I'll help you build the best school Ghana has ever seen. Either way, Amara, I'm with you. She looked down at the letter, at the dream she'd carried since childhood, the city, the university, the escape from village life. Then she looked at the wooden bird on the windowsill, at the 23 children who came to her classroom every day, hungry to learn, at the village that was slowly, painfully, learning to see women differently. She folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer. I choose here, she said, but on my terms. We build a real school, certified teachers, government funding, a place where tradition and progress can live together. Kofi's smile was like sunrise. Then let's build it. 2 years later, the Amara Mensa School for Girls opened its doors. The building stood on a hill overlooking Akoma, 4 classrooms with glass windows, a library with 500 books, a computer lab funded by Kobina Industries. 150 students enrolled the first week, girls from Akoma and 7 surrounding villages ages 6 to 18. The government certified it within 6 months. By the end of the first year, other villages were sending delegations to ask, how did you do this? How do we replicate it? Amara stood at the entrance on opening day, watching students file past in their new uniforms, indigo skirts and white blouses, the same indigo that had marked her wedding day. Her hand rested on her stomach, where a small life was just beginning to show. Kofi stood beside her, no longer in rags. He wore simple clothes, clean, well-made, but not ostentatious. He'd learned the balance between hiding and showing off. Your mother would be proud, he said softly. Amara smiled. So would Amma. Inside, 10 teachers, all women, all trained, all paid fair wages, began their first lessons. The sound of children's voices rose like birdsong, bright with curiosity and hope. Chief Osei worked as the school's janitor. It had been his idea. 8 months after losing his title, he'd approached Amara at the construction site and asked for work. Any work. He wanted to rebuild trust through service, not words. She'd given him a mop, a broom. And one condition. He would treat every girl in the school with the respect he'd failed to show his own daughter. He'd agreed. Every morning now, he arrived before dawn to sweep classrooms. Every afternoon, he helped students carry heavy books. Every evening, he thanked Amara for the chance to be better than he'd been. Slowly, painfully, he was learning what she'd always known. Worth isn't inherited or bought. It's earned through the small choices we make when no one's watching. Kwame never returned to Akoma. After serving 4 months in the district jail for fraud and theft, he moved to Accra. Word filtered back through relatives. He'd found work as a driver, joined a church, stopped gambling. Some stories ended in redemption, others just ended. Kwame's was still being written. On a quiet evening 2 years after the wedding, Amara stood in the school's courtyard and addressed the assembled village. Parents, students, elders, even some who'd once turned their backs on her at market, gathered under strings of lights Kofi had hung between the trees. "My mother once told me," Amara began, her voice steady and clear, "that true worth lives in the heart, not the purse. I didn't understand what she meant until I married a man this village called a beggar." She looked at Kofi, who stood at the edge of the crowd, content to remain in the shadows. "He taught me that the richest people are often the ones who give the most and expect the least. That power without character is just noise. That freedom means nothing if you're too afraid to use it." She held up the wooden bird, now mounted on a plaque beside the school entrance. "This was my wedding gift. A reminder that I wasn't trapped, that I had wings even when I couldn't see them." She set it down gently. "Every girl who walks through these doors will learn the same lesson. You're not defined by bride price or family name or what others think you're worth. You define yourself through your choices, through your courage, through the lives you touch." The crowd erupted in applause. Among them, Issy wiped tears from her face. Abina smiled, her own daughter enrolled in the school's first class. Old Nana Ya nodded from her seat of honor, her hands folded over her cane. The village was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but changing. What would you do if someone judged you by appearances instead of character? These are the kinds of life stories that remind us dignity isn't bought, it's chosen. African folklore and real-life stories like this one prove that touching stories about quiet resilience often become the loudest revolutions. This African story shows us that the greatest wealth isn't counted in cedis or credentials, but in the courage to see people truly and the grace to become who we were meant to be. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You are more than they see. You are more than they said. You are exactly enough. Drop a comment below. What injustice have you witnessed turn into justice? What story of hidden dignity have you carried? And subscribe for next week's tale, The Chief's Daughter, who refused the throne until the kingdom begged her to return, because the best stories aren't about power or revenge, they're about worth, and the long journey to claiming it.